You are listening to Talk for the Non-Talkers, an introvert's field guide to thriving in a world that often favors the loud. I am Sanjay Gopinath, your host. This show is produced by Indira Priyadashini, and together we explore how quiet minds can lead, connect, and show up powerfully without pretending to be someone they are not. Today, we are joined by an incredible guest whose work sits at the intersection of communication, mental health, and neurodiversity. A speech and language therapist who studied at Trinity College Dublin and Gallaudet University, the renowned institution of deaf education. Her passion for language began early, inspired by growing up with a deaf brother. This deeply personal experience shaped her understanding of the diverse ways we connect, communicate, and navigate the world. Now working in child and adolescent mental health services, she is not just supporting young people, but also leading efforts to make mental health care more neuroaffirmative, a framework that celebrates neurological differences rather than pathologizing them. Her recent project focuses on creating inclusive spaces where neurodivergent individuals, introverts, and anyone with unique communication styles can thrive. With a career dedicated to amplifying voices that often go unheard, she brings a wealth of insight into how we can better understand introversion, advocate for quieter strengths, and foster environments where everyone feels seen. Please welcome Sarah Burns. All right, Sarah, welcome to the show, Talk for the Non-Talkers. Very glad to see you here.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So, without much ado, let us probably get started. And I'm sure that some of your experience, especially working with children, will be of much use to the listeners of this podcast. I start with a very probably basic question, and I'm sure that since you have been working in this field, you have been exposed to this multiple times. So, can you explain from a very fundamental point of view what it means for the child to be introverted? And is there a difference between that about what we hear about shyness, social anxiety, and those kinds of terms?
Yes, thanks, Sanjay. And yeah, in my experience, I work as a speech and language therapist with children and adolescents, or in some countries, it's referred to as a speech and language pathologist. So in my experience, an introverted child can be described as someone who's more naturally reserved and they enjoy solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to recharge by spending time alone or in small, more quiet settings. And they may prefer, I suppose, deeper conversations over that small talk or what we call chit chat. And they'd often think more before speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that being introverted is a personality trait. It's not a problem or a fear-driven behavior. Introverted kids and adults often enjoy people, but maybe in smaller doses and maybe in low stimulation environments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to, in your question there, you've asked to understand how that differs from shyness and social anxiety. Shyness is about some discomfort or hesitation in social situations. A shy child might want to engage, but maybe feels awkward or a little bit uncertain. Typically, they're hesitant to engage with new people, but they may warm up over time. It's like they want to interact, but struggle with confidence. But they can gain confidence with practice and reassurance. But then social anxiety goes deeper. It involves an intense, like a fear of being judged or embarrassed in social situations.
Mm.
And it can lead to avoidance of these situations altogether.
Mm.
And the avoidance of social interactions, it's due to distress. Like it's not a preference. And it can actually lead to physical symptoms, things like sweating, trembling, tummy aches. And it often requires more specialized support to manage. So I
Right.
suppose to put it in a few words, I would say an introverted child might enjoy playing alone because it feels right, it feels natural. A shy child may want to join, but they're going to be a bit more hesitant. And a child with social anxiety may avoid interaction due to a fear.
Hmm. I think that's an excellent way to probably distinguish that, and thank you for a very good explanation. So now I'm taking it from a parent's perspective, right? Parents, when they see their child, especially early part of their childhood, they see their child preferring to be left alone and not socializing. I'm sure that some of the parents may get a bit anxious. So how do we support especially leaning onto your experience, how do you support parents uh, who have got an introverted child and maybe help those parents make sure that they give that space for that introverted child without pushing them out of their comfort zone? So what are some of your advices to the parents who support an introverted child?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question, Sanjay. And it's difficult because, on one hand, all parents want their child to be happy and connected. So it's understandable to feel concerned if your child prefers to be on their own, if they prefer solitude.
Hmm.
And like there are so many research studies that tell us that engaging positively with people in your social support network is a key ingredient for happiness. I just was reading an article last week, and it was in the Harvard Business Review, which highlighted how positive relationships actually keep us happier, healthier, and they say even help us live longer.
Hmm.
Studies have shown that high levels of social support predict longevity as reliably as regular exercise. And I think that's kind of an amazing statistic. So it's really important that we are part of a social network. But on the other hand, introverted children often thrive quietly. It's so critical that they can grow confidently without needing to become someone that they're not. And so there are other studies that have told us that masking, and in my work, by masking, we mean when a person maybe consciously or even unconsciously kind of hides or suppresses their natural behaviors or traits to fit in with social expectations. And by doing that, that can take a significant toll on our mental well-being, and you don't want that.
Yeah.
So getting the right balance is key. So to go back to answer your question, there are suggestions how parents can support an introverted child without pushing too hard. And the first thing I would suggest is to accept and affirm their temperament, your child's temperament. Um, I think for all of us, whether you're a child, an adolescent, or an adult, self-awareness and self-acceptance are key to our happiness and well-being. So I suppose by self-awareness, I mean, having an awareness of what are your interests, what are your strengths, what are your challenges, how do you identify? So kind of knowing that and accepting who you are is key for your happiness. So as parents, then you want to let your child know it's important to be themselves and enjoy time alone. And it's okay to prefer quieter spaces. So you would avoid implying that solitude is a problem and instead use more affirming phrases. Like you might say, well, you're really good at listening. And you might say to your child, you think before you speak. And that's a powerful strength. Um, Another thing is to kind of normalize introversion by sharing examples of admired introverted people across different fields. And I think, Sanjay, that's part of what you aim to do in your podcast series. talking to people who've had an impact in their area, and not they've been successful not despite their introversion, but often because of it.
Mhm.
And I suppose really well-known examples who you may or may not have on your podcast series. It might be someone like, say, Barack Obama. He's often described as reflective and a thoughtful leader. He's known for listening carefully before he speaks. The performer Beyonce,
Yeah.
off stage, she describes herself as shy and introverted, but she has such a commanding presence on stage. J.K. Rowling is another example I can think of, the author of the Harry Potter books. She's known for her deep imagination and love of writing in solitude.
Right. Right.
Um, Another thing you can do is kind of encourage connection without too much pressure. So maybe suggest low pressure social opportunities like short one-on-one play dates or shared interest activities. So for your kind of play dates, maybe sometimes organizing them outside the home, maybe having them activity based. I don't know, it depends where you are in the world and what your interests are, but maybe doing something like going bowling or going to a movie, so you're sharing that experience, but there's low pressure for conversation and being sociable. Um, Let the kids observe maybe before joining in, and respect when they need to say no. And you can always go back and gently revisit the options later. And maybe support them in trying different social settings, new activities, and remind them it's okay to move on if something's not enjoyable or something doesn't feel right. The other thing to do is kind of to support more meaningful relationships. Like introverted children often prefer a few close friends over big groups. And I suppose to celebrate those connections, focus maybe on quality rather than quantity when it comes to friendships and social success.
Mhm.
And then I think lastly, as parents, our job is to provide structure and predictability and a safe base for our kids. You can prepare them for social situations by explaining like what to expect and who'll be there. And maybe to give them an exit strategy. In other words, I suppose a plan for what they can do and say if they feel overstimulated. Like having a kind of a graceful excuse, or in my work, we call it a cover story.
Mm.
And that a strategy that it comes from a program called Peers that was developed at UCLA. And what they mean, a cover story is a socially acceptable reason that you can give for declining an invitation, maybe leaving a social situation, or even opening or closing a conversation. So, for example, you might say, I need to go now, my mum's picking me up soon, or I wish I could come to your party, but I have family plans that night. Thanks for inviting me. So you've kind of got like a store of things in your head that you can say if you need to leave a social situation. And I think by having that, it gives you confidence then to go into the social situation. If you know, I can get out of this if I need to, it makes you be more confident. And I suppose just for home to be your child's recharging zone, if you like, that it's quiet, it's predictable, it's emotionally safe, and that you're going to support your child and that they know that.
Right.
Um, that's important.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, sir. I mean, this is like great bit of actually a lot of tips, which not even as a child, as an adult, you can do. And some things when you were talking, of course, you are talking from a child's perspective. And
Mhm.
you use this term called cover story, right? And the first time hearing that term, but I use that often as an adult to get out of situations
Yeah,
that, yeah, there is somebody waiting at home. I need to go. My like relatives are at home. So I use
yeah,
that still. So it probably if I trained better as a child, then I would have been better now, but I use that. So I can relate to that. And something which you talked, which I really liked, was one, to be aware that your kid is an introvert, and help him also, him or her, make sure that they are aware, and also affirm that, and then normalize that it's okay that
Exactly.
you don't enjoy this. So beautiful suggestions. I'm sure that these are all very, very practical tips, and thank you for sharing all your experience in a few minutes. Okay, so now moving further from a family or a home setting to a school setting, and I still say most of the corporates, at least in this part of the world, are made for extroverts. Similarly, most of the schools are also designed for extroverted children. So how do we give some like advice or suggestions to the teachers and the parents to make sure that the students, these introverted students, also survive as well and thrive as well in their school life?
Yeah, I think that's very true that schools often cater to group work and kind of constant interaction, very fast-paced participation, and that can unintentionally leave introverted children feeling drained and overlooked or misunderstood. I guess was when you think about what happens in a school, it's group-centered learning, there's group projects, collaborative activities, and an introverted child can struggle to be heard or contribute meaningfully. There's constant social stimulation, busy hallways, noisy lunchrooms, and there's a pressure to speak up. Certainly here where I'm based in Ireland, our whole curriculum now is very much a bias to oral participation and even oral exams. And introverted kids may have great ideas and knowledge, but they can be hesitant to share them aloud, and that can then make them feel less capable than they are. And that quietness can then sometimes be misunderstood by teachers. They might be unfairly labeled or underestimated. And I suppose the other thing about schools is there's so little alone time. There's very few moments in the school day that are built for solitude or quiet reflection. And so an introverted child, may not get the chance to recharge, and that can, be difficult. Now, I'm not a teacher, so I can only kind of make very general comments. And I do think that teachers are much more aware now than maybe in the past of different learning styles, and they are trained to kind of accommodate their teaching to fit those different styles. But I suppose what I'd suggest is maybe first offering choice in participation. So instead of always looking for a spoken answer, teachers might let students draw or write responses. A really good way nowadays, thanks to technology, is to allow young people contribute to online discussions or share in smaller groups. Another thing like teachers can do is there's an activity called Think, Pair, Share. So by think, the teacher maybe gives a question or a topic, and the students take a moment to think about the response themselves. Then they might be paired up with a partner to discuss or brainstorm that. So it's a kind of a low pressure setting, one-on-one. And then the last part is where they share, maybe in their pairs or bigger groups, share their thoughts with the whole class. And you're then maybe more confident because you've already rehearsed your ideas with the partner. The other thing teachers can do is maybe design more balanced group work. So like to assign clear roles so everyone can contribute meaningfully. Maybe one person's going to be the researcher, another's going to be the writer, the organizer, whatever, and create quieter, more structured environments for those group tasks. teachers can allow kind of recharge opportunities, to allow some short, quiet breaks, maybe silent reading time, or a peaceful area where students can reset. And to avoid putting students on the spot, to give, if teachers can give advance notice for presentations or questions, maybe use question previews or discussion prompts so they've time to prepare. For example, even preparing for this today, Sanjay, you were kind enough to give me the kind of discussion points of the topics that we were going to talk about. And that helped me to prepare, and that helped my confidence in coming on the podcast. So that works really well. And then just for teachers to value those quiet strengths, highlight and celebrate listening, reflection, empathy, creativity. They're all traits that are often found in introverts. And then to kind of finish the last part of your sentence, I think, or your question, you asked me about then how parents then can do their part from home. And I would say the key there is communicating with school and with your children's teachers. Let them know your child may need time to warm up in new settings, or they prefer quieter participation. And if you can build a relationship with the teacher and advocate for balance, to work with the school to ensure a balance of social and solitary opportunities.
Makes sense. And what I'm increasingly realizing while I'm speaking to you, Sarah, is that many of the things which you are talking from a child's or a student's perspective are still valid in a corporate environment with an adult.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, that giving that space and time for an introvert to not just being forcing him to kind of talk, but actually collect the responses probably in a written format, collect the responses prior. And something which I always tell some of my introverted team members before I go into a meeting is that, hey, I know, Mr. Swan, so that you are an expert in this. So we are going to discuss this in the next meeting. So if you have any suggestions, please bring it forward to me now, like so that we can prepare it well and present it. So somewhere those kinds of spaces, if we create, people become more valued, and we also make sure that it's more of an inclusive space for everybody to thrive and enjoy. So great suggestions again.
Yeah.
So moving ahead, and you touched on this earlier also, that there is a tendency that introverted children will prefer deep one-on-one relationships rather than making too many friends. And I can relate that to my childhood. And even now, I have probably a fewer deep friends than a lot of friends. And my son always, when he compares myself with my wife, which is mother, so he says that, again, my wife is an extrovert and I'm an introvert. And he says that, hey, you have very less friends, very few friends. And then, and my mother has got a lot of friends. So in this case of from a parent's perspective, how do we encourage the the introverted kid to even develop some healthy social manners? I mean, not social manners, but but socially encourage them to develop some such healthy social development skills without overwhelming them, because we want them to blend in, but we also are careful, as you earlier put. We are aware and we want to affirm their identity that they will get overwhelmed. So, how do you play that balance as a parent?
Yeah. Yeah. I think introverted children often crave like depth over quantity when it comes to friendships. That's what we've been talking about. And that's not only okay, it's a strength. So the key is helping them to build those meaningful connections at their own pace without forcing them into like an overwhelming social environment. So there's a couple of important points about friendships which maybe seem obvious, but they've been kind of borne out or studied in research. I already mentioned that peers program that the cover story idea comes from, but there's another similar program for younger kids called Secret Agent Society that I use in my work. It's out of Australia. And both those programs are evidence-based and they're founded on these principles. The first is that friendship is a choice. Both people must want the friendship for it to work. You don't have to be friends with anyone, and they don't have to be friends with you. You can't force someone to be your friend. It has to be mutual. So that's the first point. The second is it's helpful to think about the traits that you value in a friend, and that's different for everyone. Some will look maybe for someone who's funny and active, while another person might place importance on their friend being kind and a good listener. So not every friendship will be a good fit, but the key is good friendships should feel equal and kind and fun and not be stressful or one-sided. And then the third thing I'd say is that there are degrees or levels of friendship. Not all relationships are the same. We have different types of friends that might range. You can think of it like on a continuum. So maybe at one end of the continuum are like strangers, then maybe you have acquaintances, maybe casual friends, close friends, and maybe what the young people I work with call their BFF, their best friend forever. So it's on a continuum, and with each kind of level on the continuum comes different expectations, different boundaries, and kind of expected behaviors. And the thing is that friendships can change levels over time. Someone can become a closer friend over time, or they might drift back to a casual friend if the connection weakens. And sometimes it's like some of my best friends at the moment are parents of my daughter's a swimmer. So we see each other a lot. She trains 5 or 6 times a week. So some of my closest friends at the moment are the parents of the children she swims with, because I'm seeing them so often and we're so connected and have a shared interest and experience. But if my daughter was to give up swimming, maybe then over time they wouldn't be as close. They might move down my continuum of friendships, if you know what I mean. So I think there are kind of 3 points about friendships. And I think that parents can support their child's friendships by being mindful of those points and by creating low pressure social opportunities, encouraging empathy and boundaries, and then I suppose modeling healthy relationships themselves, and modeling in their own friendships.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, it's very good tips. Again, what I'm taking away is that friendship is a choice, and the parents can create a low pressure social opportunities for people, for their introverted kids to thrive, and make sure that they know that they have a choice whether they need to make a friend, and choices for the friend also to make friendship with them. So don't put the child under pressure. Great tips.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I get that concept of continuum which you talked about. Even for me, and for your kid, it is swimming. And when my son was playing football, um, at an early stage in his life, then I used to take him, and I had a few friends there, again, parents of the other kids. And then he moved on from football to a different sport of basketball. And then they slowly moved on. and I slowly moved on. So I completely get what you are trying to say. And I
Yeah,
think,
it's not like you fell out with them or had a disagreement, right? You're just not seeing them, so you haven't got the same opportunity to keep up the connection in the same way.
that's correct. That is
Yeah.
correct. That's correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was very interesting. And then you also touched on the need for an introvert to recharge. I mean, be it an adult or be it a child. And you also talked about how probably the homes can be a recharge zone. So again, coming back to the parents in helping these introverted kids recharge, because as we talked earlier, the school is primarily designed for extroverted kids. So how do you make sure that at home you have an environment where the parents can ensure that their child gets enough alone time without actually isolating themselves too much?
I think that's a delicate balance to strike. Like it's been said that alone time is like oxygen for introverts, and it's essential for their well-being. But just like anything else, the key is balance, as we've been saying. Too much alone time can tip into isolation, and especially if it's driven by anxiety or avoidance rather than a genuine need. So, with I'd say gentle guidance, introverted children can learn to, look after themselves, honor their needs, if you like, without retreating from the world. So, first thing is to normalize alone time as a healthy part of life, frame it positively. Alone time helps your brain rest and your creativity grow. Build it into your daily routine, that you've maybe quiet reading time after school, hobbies you can do on your own, or just time in your room to decompress, and protect that time like you would sleep or meal time or anything. It's essential. And to create a rhythm that like balances solo activities with gentle social ones. So mix in both alone time and low pressure social time throughout the week. And I think to think of it, like we've been talking about recharging, to think of it like a battery system. The battery wears down and you need to recharge it. So solitude charges them up so they can engage when it matters and then rest again afterwards. Another thing to do is to encourage parallel play. Doing quiet activities side by side can be a bridge between solitude and connection. So inviting shared downtime, like reading books side by side, drawing together, or just even doing separate tasks but in the same room. And then I think what's really important is to check in and watch for changes. If your child seems sad or disengaged during alone time, check in.
Mhm. Very, very nice. I mean, I couldn't think about that space for, say, for example, painting. Everybody is doing their own pictures, but you are in a space where everybody is there. Well, that's a very interesting exercise probably to do. And you ended by saying that a check-in if the child is sad. So I'm getting into that question now in terms of at what point should parents be concerned? Should they be concerned at all that their child's introversion is turning into social anxiety or depression? What is that point that will trigger these parents to act? And then what could be some of the steps they could take at that point?
Yeah. So, like, while introversion itself is healthy and normal and natural, there are times when it can maybe mask or overlap with deeper issues like social anxiety that we've mentioned or depression. So the key is noticing when a child's need for solitude shifts from recharging that we've been talking about to withdrawing out of fear or maybe out of sadness or overwhelm. Now, something we haven't touched on yet, Sanjay, and that we should, is it's important to be mindful of cultural differences. In some cultures, being quiet and reserved or emotionally restrained is seen as respectful and appropriate. So what might look like shyness or withdrawal in one context could be, healthy self-regulation in another. So just to be mindful of that. But if parents start to be concerned, they might be concerned if they notice that their child is avoiding social situations, not just out of preference, but out of fear, as I say, distress, low mood. And the red flags, things to look out for can include if your child has intense worry about being judged or embarrassed, if they have physical symptoms like tummy aches before social events, if they have persistent sadness or irritability, maybe a loss of interest in things they previously enjoyed, activities they previously enjoyed, and if you see them withdrawing from family or close friends. I think if you see a change in what was normal for your child, if that has changed in a negative way, then maybe you're concerned. And if you're concerned, I suppose the first step is to create a safe space for conversation and ask open-ended questions like, what's been feeling hard lately? Is there anything about school or friends that's bothering you? That can give you an insight into how your child is feeling. And then just observe the patterns over time. And as I say, if you see a change, are they happy when they're alone? Do they seem lonely and stuck? And then it's very helpful to connect with school, check in with teachers, see if they're seeing the same things you're seeing. Have they noticed any changes? So after that, if you're concerned, seek, again, it might depend on where you're based, but maybe seeking support from your general practitioner, a pediatrician, or a child psychologist can help rule out any underlying issues and identify the right kind of support or direct you and support you. So those professionals, together with the young person themselves, parents and teachers, can look at the child's profile, their strengths and challenges, and they can consider whether something else might be underlying how they're presenting and feeling. It might be something like autism, ADHD, learning difficulties, sensory sensitivities, which can influence a child's social behavior and comfort in group settings. So understanding that full picture is key to responding and responding appropriately. So the goal isn't to push children into being more social than they want to be, but to make sure that they feel safe and confident and connected in ways that are right for them. As we know, introversion isn't a problem, but if it starts to limit a child's well-being or daily life, it's a good time to step in and explore what else might be going on and offer some support if that's necessary.
Yeah, again, what I'm going to take away from here is, Sarah, that as a parent, you have to be more observant. And if there's a deviation from the normal way how your child behaves, probably that is where you start probing further in terms of open-ended questions, what been going on, check in with the school, whether what you're seeing as a parent is consistent with what the teachers are seeing. And then if you think it is time, that probably you consult a child psychologist or an expert, pediatrician is an expert, and then give him or her the right support. So, and also the one point which you talked about on cultural nuances, I think absolutely well said. And I can see it being part of larger multinational companies where there are a lot of different cultures. I mean, people come from various cultures, adults, I'm talking here about adults, come from different cultures. And then I can see the difference when they get into, all of them get into some kind of a meeting or a common area, and then how different people behave and what's considered normal. And at some point in time, I also had got feedback from people from different cultures who are generally concerned. I mean, out of genuine concern, they say, like, what's happening, Sanjay? Your team was not speaking in that call. Whereas, I mean, for me, it is normal in
Yeah.
such situations because, as you rightly said, there is a cultural lens through which we should all see many of those things.
Mm.
So, yes, well said in terms of instead of children as well as very valid for the adults. And now, probably we're winding off our podcast. I mean, I just want to gain a little bit more into your experience as an introvert and all the experts we got on this talk are all introverts, including myself. So I also want to lean on to some of your experiences as an introvert, as an introverted parent. How did it play out for you in parenting?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. And actually, I've been thinking about this a little bit, like preparing for this podcast in my head, thinking about it. I have two children, and my son is now 23 and he's at university, and my daughter is 16 and she's at secondary school. And I suppose maybe like all parents, I've had a bit of a learning curve over the years. I can remember when they were younger, I used to sign them up for lots of activities, thinking it'd be good for them and, broadening their horizons, helping them make friends. And I spent lots of money on different activities. And then only to feel frustrated when they wanted to give it up. And if I'm honest, sometimes that felt like a failure to me at the time. If they'd signed up for a drama class or something and then they wanted to give it up,
Hmm.
I was feeling frustrated and disappointed. But I suppose with hindsight, I see it differently. I think trying different things helped them figure out what they liked and what they didn't. And actually, there's a real value in quitting when something isn't the right fit. And that process of trial and error is where the learning happens. And I suppose the key I've maybe come to realize is finding your passion. And friendships then often grow out of shared interests. And that kind of connection takes time. I think many parents, often with the best of intentions, fall into the trap of pushing their kids a little too hard, maybe trying to give them more than we had or help them succeed. You want the best for them, but sometimes in doing that, we forget the bigger picture. And what matters most is that they're having fun, they're discovering what lights them up, making their own mistakes, and learning to trust themselves. And that's what helps us grow into confident people. And I suppose that's something I think we all value. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah, good, good. Yeah. I mean, I can also relate to some of the things which you talked about. I mean, you talked earlier about exposing them to various activities, right? And as parent, you want the best out of them. So I think a good number of parents try to do that, and individually, we ourselves feel frustrated because because the child or the kid doesn't continue that beyond a point. But it's good that they get exposed to a lot of things and then figure out their own way of what they like. So I can very well relate to that.
Yeah.
I guess that is probably common in most of the cultures across the world.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Sarah, this was a great conversations and really, I mean, it's a new perspective coming into our podcast because till now we were talking to professionals from different field. I wish we could get Barack Obama and Beyonce on the call. Yeah,
You keep
but
working on that, Sanjay.
yeah, yeah, who knows? Who knows? So we have one of the artists also speaking to us. So if it's even if it's not Beyonce, we have somebody
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
sharing her experiences on this. So that's good. But you covered lot from a child's perspective and a parent's and from a teacher's perspective, and that's probably the formative years. And the more people are aware, and as parents and teachers, we are able to understand introversion as a trait and not as a disease or a syndrome.
Yes.
I think it's better that we realize that early, we become aware and make the kid also aware and normalize that, and it's okay. It's okay. And one more big sentence which I heard was uh, a friendship is a choice. So that's a big sentence for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of I'm noted down a few points here. Empathy, and you talked about making sure that there's a recharge zone for the kids at home, and then how you can actually help them recharge. It's like they come back from school, and it's similar thing for me also coming back from office. I'm like a drained battery, and I need my time to
Yeah.
recharge. So I think give that space for the kid to recharge. I think that's also a beautiful tips. So altogether, I think we covered a lot of topics, and also thanks, Sarah, for sharing your personal experience as an introverted parent bringing up the kids. I really enjoyed that discussion, and I'm sure that our listeners too. So once again, thank you so much for spending time with us.
No, well, thank you so much for inviting me, Sanjay. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning into Talk for the Non-Talkers, where quiet minds speak loud truths. If today's conversation resonated, share it with someone, introvert or extrovert, who will appreciate it. Follow the show on Spotify or YouTube and leave a review. This will help more people discover the podcast. This is Sanjay with Indira signing off. Until next time, keep showing up quietly but powerfully.